Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of What Did the Patient Say with Doctors Dana and Lauren Brindisi, sisters and owners of Carolina Functional Neurology Center. We are bringing you inside information from real conversations we have with patients on a daily basis. We get asked the same questions and want to spread the truth on health and healing because we believe everyone deserves to know the answers.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of What Did the Patient Say? Today we are going to be talking about a lot of patients that we see in our clinics, but I think a lot of people that are just out there looking for answers to their healthcare. So the topic is, why am I being told everything is normal when I still feel what I feel in terms of symptoms?
Yeah, I would say we see that a ton. That's a lot of our patients, and they've been shuffled around from doctor to doctor, running this lab and that lab and this imaging, and everything's checking out from a more traditional medicinal standpoint. But these patients are very symptomatic, and what they're dealing with is very real. And as we kind of talked about a couple episodes ago, was a lot of times then these patients just get chalked up as having anxiety when they know for sure, right? They can listen to their bodies and understand that what they're dealing with is not just anxiety, and they're really symptomatic. So the next question is, well, what do you do about it, right? And who do you go see?
Yeah. And, what are some of the common things I think we want to address that patients are experiencing that are being told these things, that everything is normal? So I think the biggest thing is to kind of understand that with traditional medicine, everything is very black and white. So you either meet the criteria for a diagnosis, or you don't meet the criteria for a diagnosis. And if you don't meet the criteria for a diagnosis, then you're basically told you're fine. But again, like we're talking about, there's this gray area where a lot of people are having symptoms. They don't yet quite meet the criteria for diagnosis.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that's really where the world of functional healthcare comes in and is so crucial for so many people out there dealing with symptoms. The reality is there's a lot of conditions that people don't just wake up with overnight, right? There's a ton of dysfunction that happens within their brain, their body, before they even fall into these criteria. So what's so great about functional healthcare in general is that we can catch these things hopefully before it continues to perpetuate and may become, a full-blown pathological process that's irreversible. I mean, it's great that people are, seeking out healthcare options when they're not feeling great, but it can be so discouraging when everybody's telling them there's nothing wrong with them, but they don't feel good. When in reality, it's awesome that they're seeking help early on. And that's really where coming to a functional provider, an integrative provider, is your best bet and your next stop, because we're going to look a little bit deeper. Like Dr. Dana said, traditional medicine is very black and white. I always tell my patients, we're looking not only black and white, but we're looking at all the gray area, right? We want to really look at all these systems with intricacy and look at normative data, but also tighten our parameters, start to understand what optimal ranges are, how that compares to normal ranges, what are your trends over time, and how can we really work to optimize your function, not just treat somebody for the diagnosis that they may or may not have.
Right. And I think a big thing for people to understand is something that we learn as holistic or integrative providers is that your symptoms are what come on after the fact. Like most people think like, oh, I just woke up one day and I was dizzy, or I woke up one day and my thyroid stopped working, or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, that's not the case. There's a lot of things that are going on in your body well before you ever would notice the symptoms, right? So sometimes you can't make that one-to-one correlation, especially in the health history. And we see trends in our patients, right? So we can say, oh, based on your health history, some of the stuff might be actually a contributing factor as to why you're feeling the way that you do now, even though it didn't happen yesterday and today you woke up with a debilitating headache. And I think another big thing for people to understand when they're navigating their own health and trying to find answers is things like lab work. Now, this is a big thing that we, I think, tell all of our patients all the time because we run a lot of lab work, that when you go to get your blood draw done, those reference ranges, aside from a couple markers, are not standardized. So what that means is that you walked into a facility, got your blood draw done, and your results are being marked against the people that went to that same facility, not, you know, the United States or the world at large, right? It's a very biased population. And if you went to a different facility and got your blood draw done, then those reference ranges would also be different. And you may be in range in one lab and out of range in another lab. So when we look at functional and holistic approaches, we're trying to narrow down those parameters. And again, while you might be not out of lab range, there's still trends that we can see in overall blood work. And I think those two things are really important for people to understand, because a lot of times you're being told, no, that's not a contributing factor, or that has nothing to do with why you have X, Y, and Z. But really, you know, things are probably happening for quite a bit of time before you were ever alerted that you had a symptom and then thought, oh, maybe I should go see somebody for that.
Yeah. It usually is something that's maybe building up over time. I would say I definitely see that in cases of dysautonomias, as we start digging through their history, really trying to understand where this might be coming from. As we kind of go through time, we can maybe pinpoint some areas or points in time in which, you know, they had a head injury, or, you know, they had an infection, or as they start digging and thinking about their symptoms, oh yeah, well, I guess, you know, I have had bouts of dizziness before this. And sometimes these symptoms may wax and wane, or your overall functionality might be better. So you're not thinking all that much about it. And the way I usually describe it for patients is our brain is really good at compensating, right? It wants to compensate for stuff. And especially in America, it's this go, 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 do more, do more, do more, be, you know, productivity. Everyone is just like wearing themselves thin. And we're not really thinking all the time about these symptoms, especially if they come and go. It's until often we see patients because things have become so debilitating that now it's affecting their everyday life, and they may be unable to work. And that's usually, you know, a big time where then we start to see people coming in, and then they're asking, well, where are my symptoms coming from? And it may not be so easy as this one contributing factor. There's probably a multitude of contributing factors.
Yeah. And like a combination of factors too, and especially over time, like things like stress, right? Like you might have a stressful event and be able to recover from it, but if you are just bombarded with stressful events all the time for a long period of time, it's going to affect your entire system. And sometimes people don't even recognize that as something that is affecting their health, because like you said, you know, we just kind of chalk that up as normal, right? That's what we do here in America. You know, we're not taking a siesta at 3 o'clock every day. We're just working. But, you know, if your system is not up to par in terms of functionality, then those things are definitely going to creep up on you.
Yeah. I would say the other interesting one is when we see patients who have had bouts of vertigo, right? Of course, if you have vertigo that comes on out of nowhere, you know, seek medical attention ASAP. You know, yeah, there are issues that happen that are, you know, you need to seek emergency help to rule those things out. But a lot of times, then when the patient ends up in our office and we start looking a little bit deeper, right? They've maybe been to the ENT and they look in their ear and say there's nothing going on. You know, we don't see, you don't have an infection. You know, they maybe do some further imaging, you know, there's not a tumor, there's nothing we could see with your inner ear that might be causing the vertigo. Well, then as we look deeper, looking more at the central aspects of the vestibular system, we start seeing dysfunction. And the reality is that doesn't happen overnight. So that bout of vertigo may have been creeping up, right? It might have been creeping up over time because you actually already had some central vestibular dysfunction that you're just powering through day to day, not really thinking much about that little bout of dizziness or that little bit of blurry vision that you get when you turn your head, or feeling kind of lightheaded when you stand up. You know, there's so many different things that we might just power through, or unresolved neck pain. That is such a big one that people are like, I've tried everything that I possibly can and nothing works. My neck's always hurting. Then we start looking at, you know, aspects of their vestibular system, aspects of their eyes, and we see that there's these central issues that might have been there for a long time, and they may not fit into a definitive diagnosis from a traditional medicinal standpoint, but they're having dysfunction within their vestibular system that can be addressed and helped.
And I think another big thing with those patients who have more chronic vertigo, and also to note, like a lot of people get diagnosed with vertigo, even though it's not true vertigo, right? Like they're not actually spinning, right? Or the world is not spinning. I think another thing a lot of those patients get run through is ENG testing at the ENT, where they are looking for a very, very specific type of nystagmus when they run you through the test. And if you don't elicit or you don't show that type of nystagmus when they run the test, they say your vestibular system is fine, which again is not always true. It's kind of like the lab work or the MRI, right? You can have functional issues without having a tumor. You can have vestibular issues without having nystagmus on your ENG. And I think also to kind of piggyback on that is so that people understand when we talk about vestibular function, you know, we're not only looking at the vestibular apparatus in your inner ear. I think a lot of people understand the vestibular system as, okay, we understand it's an inner ear issue, right? And so, you know, we're looking at the canals and the crystals, and a lot of people, especially if you've had dizziness or vertigo, you're familiar with those types of terms. What I think a lot of people don't understand, and what oftentimes is kind of missed when these patients are being evaluated traditionally, is that if the dysfunction is no longer in the inner ear, meaning you don't have a canal issue, and what you had mentioned was central vestibular issues, a lot of times those are being overlooked because now we're talking about the communication between your inner ear in through your cranial nerves to your brain stem, and then where all that information goes, right? And as functional neurologists, we're able to evaluate that whole system, because your vestibular system is a whole system, meaning there's more to it than just the vestibular apparatus that everybody talks about in the inner ear. And I think a lot of dizziness patients get kind of shuffled through, and they're like, I don't feel steady. I can't like walk on my feet. I feel like I'm on a boat, or can't ride in the car, or I can't turn my head. But then they go and get all of that traditional testing done, and everything is quote unquote normal. So we don't know why you're dizzy.
Yeah. And then what? Then what do people do?
Again, they're dizzy.
Yeah. Yeah. Go to a functional healthcare provider. If that is happening to you, seek out someone local that might be able to look a little bit deeper. And if they can, hopefully they can help point you in a better direction for someone that may work with the type of condition that you're dealing with. Where else do you see that often, Dana, with patients?
I was just thinking, we see it a lot, I think, with thyroid patients too. Is, you know, their labs are quote unquote normal, but they're also having a lot of symptoms. So whether it's, you know, fatigue or hormonal issues, or, you know, whatever they're describing, we see a lot of thyroid dysfunction, because a lot of thyroid dysfunction results in neurological symptoms.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why we address it. But a lot of times we'll find, because again, we're running more in-depth testing. So traditionally, when we talk about thyroid, you know, you're getting a TSH run and maybe a T4, maybe a free T4 if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But there's so many other markers. I think what a lot of people don't know about thyroid is that it actually starts in your brain. So when we talk about thyroid dysfunction, everyone's looking at and paying attention to your thyroid gland. But in order to get the whole picture of how your thyroid is functioning, and this is stuff that we talk about all the time with like the extended autonomic nervous system and the relay between your brain and your endocrine system, right? So your hypothalamus is sending signal to your pituitary gland, and then your pituitary gland is sending signal to all of these other organs to help make hormone, whether that be your thyroid or your ovaries or your testes or whatever it is, right? It's all starting in your brain from your hypothalamus. So if we don't have a full picture on labs of what this thyroid cascade looks like, then we don't really know for sure where that dysfunction is coming from and if it is truly normal. Because we can say, all right, we see an issue from the brain to the thyroid gland, or we may see issues where people aren't converting thyroid hormone appropriately, which actually happens in your gut and in your liver. And if you're only running a handful of markers, then again, you're just being told like those 2, maybe 3 markers are normal. And you're like, I don't feel good. Like this can't possibly be what normal feels like.
Yeah, and that's the other thing with thyroid that I think is interesting is, again, mostly TSH is run. But when you look at Hashimoto's, which is autoimmunity to the thyroid, that starts from your immune system, right? That's your immune system tagging your thyroid as foreign and attacking it. But that cascade of information happens for a long time before your TSH is actually altered out of lab range. So we always are checking thyroid antibodies to understand what is the immune system doing and how is that talking to your endocrine system. And if we can catch that early, right? Hashimoto's non-thyroiditis, right? You don't have primary thyroid disease, but your immune system is
nagging.
It's nagging it, and we really want to address not your thyroid, your immune system, because that's really where it starts from. That's a big one for me because I've definitely had several patients where we've caught that, and they've been so thankful because the next step really, a big part of that comes in with educating patients, right, and understanding what they're dealing with, and but then they have the option and the choice to start really making different decisions and understanding things that can affect their overall health, but their immune system health, and try to keep that at bay.
Yeah, I think another one, I mean, that's a good point. I think because we run baseline labs on everybody, we're catching those things before they become like a full-blown, like you said, thyroid disorder. Another one that I think we're seeing a lot more clinically, and I think this is probably biased to our patient population because we see so many dysautonomias, is these patients that have had ANA, positive ANA, and they have had all these other tests done, and they don't come up with a diagnosis for any specific autoimmune disease. But we know that there's some autoimmunity there somewhere, and we treat it like we need to support the immune system, even if we can't quite pinpoint. Because right now, especially for a lot of these dysautonomias, right, we don't have a definitive test to say like, here's a test to know if you have autoimmune dysautonomia. But a lot of times, or I'm seeing often with these patients that are coming in, is that they're like, I have a positive ANA, but nobody can find anything. Well, we're probably in the world of autoimmunity. And you're probably producing antibodies to something. Right now, I think they're looking at receptors, antibodies to receptors that help control your vasculature. So, just again, it's like this area of grayness or unfuzziness that we don't have a definitive diagnosis for. From a functional perspective, we are doing our best to treat the root cause of the problem. So if we know that there's some immune dysregulation there, we at least have to address it. And you've got to be careful when you do that because you can have a lot of different types of immune dysregulation, right? So you can't just nitty gritty, like throw a bunch of immune support at somebody. You've got to be, specific and understand what you're doing. And I say that because I don't want people just go in and buying supplements off the shelf, being like, oh, I just need to support my immune system, right? You want to find somebody that knows what they're doing and understands kind of what that dysfunction looks like. But I think that, our biggest takeaway that we want to give to people today is just that if you are symptomatic and you know that it's not anxiety that's driving it, right? Or even if it is, but if you fall in this gray area, which is so common, like don't give up hope, and definitely look for somebody that works more in a functional realm. So functional neurologists, functional medicine doctors, integrative MDs, like all of those people are understanding this kind of world that we're talking about. And, fortunately, we see a lot of people in that gray area, and we're able to help them because we're not, sticking to traditional parameters, just black and white, like you're healthy or you're not healthy.
Yeah.
And that's all there is there.
Yeah, if anything, I love the gray area because I'm like, you don't have a full-blown pathological process going on. You've got some dysfunction going on. So let's get you functioning better and feeling better. And sometimes that can be more complicated than even some of the patients who come in already having a diagnosis. But a lot of times, that's definitely a better place to be. And we can just get you to a more optimal place and get you feeling better.
Yep, absolutely. I hope that this helps somebody or several people. And if this resonates with you, please reach out to us or other functional providers and help get some answers. And I think that everybody always is looking for a definitive diagnosis, and just understand that you may not have it. And that's not a bad thing. I do think that that's hard for people to kind of wrap their brain around, because we're so ingrained to understand that black and white, right? Like I have this disease or disorder or I don't. But I hope that this resonates with some people and allows people to find maybe some help that they have been looking for, or at least to investigate other avenues that maybe they haven't considered in the past.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Right. Yay for functional healthcare.
Yes, we love it. Well, as always, we really appreciate you guys following us, listening to us. Please continue to send in your comments and questions, and our interactions with you guys are what are driving these videos and helping us to hopefully provide some answers for people that are looking for them. So please subscribe to our channel, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, shoot us a like, and again, shoot us your comments or questions or any other topics that you might have questions on that we can hopefully answer for you in the future.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.